Hello everybody, I'm Gary Massa with Massa & Associates and welcome to the Termite edition of Tips Tuesday. Now, if you've bought or sold a home in San Diego before, you know that termites are definitely something that we always have to consider. But if you're selling a home in today's market, let's talk a little bit more about how not to have those swarmy little suckers ruin your transaction. So first and foremost, as of a couple years ago, the banks or buyers' banks or the lenders rather aren't requiring that you get a Section 1 termite clearance. It's typically been in the past where the seller's always done the termite work and provided a Section 1 clearance. A few years ago, that changed. So unless the buyer writes it into the contract, you don't need to provide a Section 1 clearance or it's not going to be required by the buyer's lender. That being said, it always tends to come up, whether it's in the inspection, the buyer asks for it in the purchase offer, etc. And again, most likely, if your home has not been tented or treated or whatever the case in the past 5-7 years, you most likely will find some evidence of termites. So it's time to get in front of that. Right now, the bigger challenge is transactions are moving very, very quickly, as you've all probably noticed in our marketplaces. The time on market is like 3 to 7 days, and the typical closing time is being pushed from anywhere from like 30 days, sometimes down to 14 or 21. And when you have to also, when the buyer finds termites in their inspections and the negotiation ends up being for the seller to provide Section 1 termite clearance, you also have to book that and schedule it. And what's happening is those companies are also all very busy right now because of all the transaction volume going on. So, you set up the termite work to be completed that was done in the inspection a couple weeks prior or during the first week, 10 days of the transaction. And that termite company can't get out there for sometimes 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, delaying the transaction. So here's how you fix that. As a seller, let's go ahead and just anticipate that the buyer is going to ask, or at least they're going to inspect later on, and it's better to be in front of that. So there's nothing wrong with you getting your own termite inspection before you list. Now those typically run about $80 to $100. In my own opinion, $80 to $100 well spent, because if the buyer does do their own termite inspection and they come back, you're going to want to know, if they ask you even upfront in the offer when you're negotiating, you don't want to blindly agree to doing a Section 1 termite clearance. What if there's something that you don't see that comes back that's $10,000, $20,000 and you just wrote a blank check to the buyer to go ahead and get that done? So knowing upfront is definitely half the battle. But secondly, you can negotiate that in the contract up front, give those disclosures, and maybe the buyer wants to take that on if it's not that big of a deal. And or if you do agree to do it in your negotiations, you can already pre-schedule that work to be done, just depending on what the forecasting of the timeline is, depending on that contract that you write. So you can already have that scheduled to be done prior to the close of escrow without having to wait 1 to 2 weeks for the buyer to pop the question, will you do the termite work? So that being said, again, it's always good to get ahead of the game, especially in a market that's moving so quickly. Knowledge is power. And as a seller, having the termite inspection and everything done and already knowing what that's going to cost you is definitely going to benefit you in the long run. That's all for now about termites. I hope that information helped. And if you have any other questions about the process, scenarios, or what to expect in a transaction, don't hesitate to let us know. I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll talk to you soon.